My name is Sierra Hudson. I'm 32 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family.
A broken marriage, a father's silent power, Alexis screaming betrayal in a mall. What happens when a woman stops swallowing her pain? And a family empire trembles because of it. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about walking away and never looking back.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
There's always that one chair, the one that doesn't match, the one that somehow feels colder than the rest. At the Hudson family gatherings, it was mine. They dressed the table like they were hosting royalty. Gold-trimmed porcelain, glistening crystal glasses, forks that probably cost more than a month of my rent. Even the linen napkins had the Hudson crest embroidered in gold thread, as if legacy could be manufactured with a sewing machine. Everyone wore designer smiles, fake warmth, and expensive perfumes that couldn't quite cover the stench of performance. But my seat, the one right next to Damon, was conspicuously empty when I arrived. Late. Again. I stepped into the dining room, brushing a curl out of my face, heart thudding against my ribs. I prayed no one noticed how my dress clung to my skin. Not because it was tailored, but because I had jogged the last few blocks in heels. The valet had lost track of my Lexus this morning, and I wasn't foolish enough to think it was just a coincidence. Damon was already mid-toast when he saw me. He raised his glass higher, grinning that smug, rehearsed grin he always wore when he knew he held the upper hand. Finally, he laughed. "She's here. Sierra had to take the train because my sweet mother's been borrowing her Lexus all week. So generous of her, right?" Everyone chuckled. The kind of sharp, artificial laughter that bounced off the chandelier like broken glass. The moment hung there, thick and awkward. I didn't say a word. Instead, I made my way to that cursed chair. As I lowered myself into it, a chill ran down my spine. My hands trembled slightly, but I gripped my leather clutch tighter until the grain dug into my palms and my fingers turned white. Damon didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He was too busy soaking up praise for being a dutiful son, basking in a spotlight he hadn't earned. That chair always knew. It held my exhaustion, my humiliation, my disappearing self-worth. Every gathering, I sat there like an ornament, silent, polished, and disposable. But then, I felt a hand rest gently on my shoulder. It was my father, Walter. He didn't say anything. Just a soft pat, a weightless gesture, but to me, it was a shield. He looked down at me, eyes calm but unreadable. Then he smiled, just enough for me to know that he saw, that he understood. He reached into his pocket and tapped his phone, typing something with quiet precision before slipping it away like a magician tucking a card into his sleeve. That's when I felt it, a shift in the room, like a wire being pulled tight beneath the surface. This night wasn't what it seemed. They say trauma doesn't always show up screaming. Sometimes it just sits quietly at the dinner table, laughing on cue. As the evening dragged on, Loretta, the queen of curated chaos, gushed about the spa she deserved after such a tough week. Raising a man like Damon is no small feat, she said with a theatrical sigh, tilting her wineglass like she was performing for invisible cameras. I mean, who else's son buys them a brand new Lexus with cash? Honestly, it's just who he is. Generous. Loyal. Across the table, Damon nodded proudly, basking in the glow of attention. He had recently been promoted, on paper at least, thanks to my father. But Damon spun it like he'd clawed his way to the top with grit and vision. Never mind the years I spent quietly building the logistics division from scratch, managing crisis after crisis while he polished his LinkedIn profile. I wasn't surprised. I was used to my erasure, used to being the prop to his story. The accessory that made him look grounded and human. The wife who smiled on cue. I just sat there, like I always did. The obedient wife. The quiet daughter-in-law. The failed daughter. My smile was the kind you wear when you've rehearsed survival. But behind my teeth was a scream no one heard. I glanced at my father again. He met my eyes briefly, then returned to his plate, cutting his steak like it had personally offended him. But I saw it, the tension in his jaw. The slight narrowing of his eyes whenever Damon spoke. He was listening, cataloging, deciding. After dinner, I slipped away to the upstairs hallway, needing a moment, just one, to breathe. The air felt different up there, less curated, more honest. Then I heard the door to the study creak open. It was my father. He stepped in, closing the door softly behind him. I followed, uninvited but welcome. I knew that door. I knew what silence behind it meant. Inside, the room smelled of old wood and ink. Faint cigar smoke lingered in the leather-bound air. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a photograph. Their wedding day, Damon and me, all teeth and tulle and lies. He stared at it for a long time. "How much?" he finally said, his voice low and measured. "Does a father have to destroy to save his daughter?" The question wasn't for me. It was for the man he used to be. The one who believed in deals and honor and family. The man who had built a company but couldn't protect his own child from the rot inside it. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He opened his laptop, typed swiftly, and picked up his phone. The faint tapping of keys and encrypted messages being sent filled the air. Something was in motion. Something irreversible. I should have stopped him, or asked, or screamed. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't alone in the fight. Someone else, my father, was stepping into the fire for me. Back in the dining room, Damon poured himself another drink, holding court like a frat boy who never aged. "You know," he said, voice smug and careless, "not everyone's cut out for the spotlight. Some people just look better in the background." The dig landed, but I didn't flinch. Not tonight. I watched him, really. Watched him, and I realized something. The man I married no longer existed. Maybe he never had. Then came my father's voice, measured, steady. "I'll be stepping away from operations for a few months," he announced, dabbing at his lips with a napkin, "to focus on transitions." Damon's brow furrowed. "Transitions?" Walter smiled faintly, his eyes not leaving Damon's. "You'll see." He raised his glass. "To family." Everyone toasted, but the air was thick, electric, like the breath before a thunderstorm. That night, I lay in bed beside a man who no longer saw me as a person. Damon was scrolling his phone, eyes glazed, probably texting someone who mattered more to him than I did. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house, the ghost of my father's touch still warm on my shoulder. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt something shift inside me, and I slept. People think silence is surrender, but sometimes silence is strategy. It's not the absence of fight, it's the coiling of it. The morning after the dinner, Damon woke up humming in the shower like he'd just won a game. His mother had texted him selfies in the Lexus, still flaunting the car as if she'd earned it. He laughed, shirtless in the mirror, flexing as if the world revolved around his reflection. "Hey babe," he said, running pomade through his hair. "Don't forget we're seeing the Shelbys tonight. Wear that black dress. You know, the one that makes you look like you're actually trying." I smiled like he expected me to. Not too much, not too little, just enough to keep the illusion intact. Downstairs, the coffee maker hissed. I poured 2 mugs. His with oat milk and collagen powder, mine plain. As I handed him the cup, I noticed the message from my father still sitting on the kitchen counter. A handwritten note in his clean cursive, just 4 words. "I'm handling it. Dad." I folded it quickly, tucked it into my journal, and tried not to shake, because I knew what that meant. Later that day, I found my father in his study again. The sunlight through the window cut across his face like a blade. He sat at his desk, the same one he'd worked at since I was a little girl, running King Energy with the kind of dignity you didn't see anymore in boardrooms. But that morning, there was something different in his eyes. A weight. He held a document in one hand, a security clearance order for the company's private investigators, and in the other, my wedding photo. Again. He didn't hear me at first. "Dad," I said softly. He turned, slow and deliberate. "Do you know what it costs," he asked, "to buy a man's loyalty?" I shook my head. "Nothing," he said, "because real men don't sell it." I stayed silent. He set the wedding photo down, face first. "I'm not asking for permission, Sierra. I'm asking you to hold your breath, just for a little longer." His voice didn't waver. But his eyes, those eyes that once read every number in a ledger like scripture, were rimmed red. He was going to war. Not with guns, with silence, with law, with power, and he was doing it for me. Meanwhile, Damon was posting stories of himself touring commercial properties and taking Zoom calls in co-working lounges. Always with that toothy grin, always playing the part of the mogul he never was. "I'm telling you," he said to one of his friends over brunch, "my instincts are finally paying off. Pops just needed a little push. I think he's going to start transitioning ownership. It's basically happening already." I watched from across the table, picking at my salad while they toasted to his imaginary empire. He believed it. He believed every bit of it. Because men like Damon don't look for truth. They look for mirrors. At night, I would lay awake beside him and count seconds. 1. Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. Each breath felt like a test of my resolve. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask him why. Why the lies? Why the manipulation? Why the erosion of the woman he once claimed to love? But I didn't. Because somewhere in my silence, my father was building a case. Somewhere in the quiet, bricks were being laid. The first sign came that Wednesday. Damon's corporate card got declined at an upscale restaurant. He laughed it off, told the waiter to try again, then quickly paid with another. He called the finance office at King Energy later and reamed out a poor junior associate, demanding to know who had messed with the hierarchy. "Do you know who I am?" he snapped into the phone. He didn't realize yet, but I did. It had begun. Back at the Hudson estate, my father met privately with our legal team. He spoke in clipped, precise sentences. He didn't want drama. He wanted airtight facts. Bank trails, company emails, GPS logs, contracts signed under duress. He was building something larger than revenge. He was crafting justice in silence. I remember peeking into his office one evening. He didn't see me, or maybe he did, but chose not to react. His screen was filled with charts and dossiers. My name was in bold on the corner of one document, highlighted, protected, like a file under national security. That's when I realized. He wasn't just saving me from Damon. He was saving me from becoming a version of myself who tolerated men like Damon. At the end of that week, we had another dinner. This one quieter, just immediate family. Damon dominated the conversation, bragging about a property acquisition that hadn't even gone through yet. My mother-in-law sipped wine and praised him like he was a genius with a golden touch. And me? I smiled. But inside, I was steel. As we walked to the car, Damon leaned in. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I looked up at him, calm, unreadable. "Just watching," I said. "It's amazing what people reveal when you say nothing." He didn't get it. He rarely did. That night before bed, I got a message from my father. No words, just a screenshot. It was a calendar invite sent to the internal board. HR audit and ethical review, Friday, or 10 a.m. My chest tightened. It was happening. And I didn't have to say a word. If you ever want to see who someone really is, take away their audience. Loretta Hudson lived her entire life with a spotlight in her eyes. She thrived on attention, whether it was earned, bought, or fabricated. She wasn't just Damon's mother. She was the architect of his entitlement. She called it raising a man. I called it conditioning a narcissist. That afternoon, she decided to host what she called a casual coffee with her inner circle. 5 women who dressed like Vogue editors and judged like jury members. I had seen them in action before. They didn't sip coffee. They dissected reputations. Loretta picked the flashiest location. The Atrium, an upscale, open-air mall where the shops carried no price tags, and the valet knew everyone's name. She pulled up in my car, the Lexus, like it was her birthright. Pearl earrings, cream silk scarf, and that smug smile that never quite touched her eyes. I watched from a distance. I had known about this little gathering. My father had too. He didn't stop it. He let it happen. He wanted it to. From the upper balcony, I saw her pose beside the car for photos. The women clapped, gasped, cooed. "Cash purchase," Loretta said proudly. My son insisted. Their praise was intoxicating to her. You could see it in her posture, chin up, chest out, each word measured for maximum vanity. Then it happened. She pressed the key fob. The Lexus blinked once, then again, then it screamed. The alarm wailed like a war siren, red lights flashing, the trunk popped open on its own. The center console lit up, and a robotic voice rang out across the parking lot. Unauthorized user, engine locked, security breach. This vehicle has been disabled. She froze. Everyone froze. Then came the stares. Her friends took a step back, not toward danger, but toward distance, as if failure were contagious. The guards at the mall approached. "Ma'am, we need to see documentation for the vehicle." She stammered, reaching for her purse. Her voice cracked. "This is my car." "No, it's not," the guard replied firmly, holding up a tablet that displayed the vehicle's registered owner. "This vehicle is registered to King Energy. It was listed this morning as a flagged asset pending retrieval." Her face fell. She turned ghost white. And then something subtle happened. The smell inside the car, that luxurious amber scent Damon insisted on, was now overtaken by burnt rubber and stale panic. Even from where I stood, I could see her nostrils flare. The car wouldn't start. Her audience was watching, and no one was clapping now. She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, what a silly mistake. My son he must have triggered something by accident." But the damage was done. The Queen of Poise had cracked. Her friends mumbled excuses and disappeared one by one, like rats abandoning a leaking yacht. Loretta stood there, stranded, humiliated, and for once silent. Back home that evening, Damon stormed into the kitchen. His voice thundered through the walls. "What the hell is going on?" I didn't flinch. I was washing dishes. Slow, calm. "She was nearly arrested," he barked. "In public. Do you understand what that does to our family name?" I turned to him, drying my hands on a towel. "Our family name," I repeated carefully. "You mean my family's name?" He blinked, caught off guard. "She was crying," he snapped. "And you're just standing here like this was nothing." "I wasn't standing," I said. "I was watching." He didn't know the half of it. That morning, my father had reclassified the Lexus as a company vehicle. The very same day, he gave full authority to our legal and security teams to enforce corporate asset protection across all properties, including those currently borrowed by family. There were no accidents. Everything was intentional, every humiliation calculated. And Loretta, she had walked right into it with her head held high, and came crawling out with a shredded ego and mascara stains on her silk scarf. That night, as I sat by the window reading, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. Sometimes shame does more than rage ever could. I stared at it for a long time. He wasn't wrong. 2 days later, Loretta sent a group message to our family chat. "Taking a break from social, detoxing, need time to center myself. So." No one responded, not even Damon. And just like that, the first thread unraveled. The family image she had so desperately clung to, perfection, status, legacy, was stained. She wasn't arrested. She wasn't on the news. But in her world, public embarrassment was a deeper wound than any scandal. She lost something that day. Not the car, not the friends, but the illusion that she was untouchable. The next morning, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. The Queen cracked, and no one noticed the crown fall but me. And I smiled. Because I wasn't done yet. That evening, I passed by Loretta's room on the way to mine. Her door was slightly ajar, no lights on, just the flicker of a TV set reflecting off the mirror. She sat at the edge of her bed, still in the same silk scarf, clutching a tissue like it was the last scrap of dignity she had left. I paused. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and chose to pretend otherwise. Her makeup was still half on, smeared at the edges. Her phone was face down beside her, buzzing quietly with messages she no longer had the courage to read. I watched her inhale shakily, then exhale like she was deflating. And for a second, a very small one, I didn't feel victorious. I felt pity, because I saw something no one else had seen in her for years. Not vanity, not rage, but fear. But it passed. And I reminded myself, this wasn't cruelty, this was balance. She had built her throne on silence and stolen spotlight, and today, for the first time in decades, she sat alone. Retribution doesn't always arrive in thunderclaps. Sometimes it walks in wearing a uniform and holding a clipboard. It was Thursday morning, The sky was clear, the estate unusually quiet. Damon had left early for a power breakfast, with investors who didn't know they were about to run out of reasons to return his calls. Loretta was on the patio in her usual silk robe, a goblet of green juice in one hand, and an artfully posed book she wasn't reading in the other. From the second-floor landing, I watched the security gates swing open. A sleek black SUV rolled up the driveway, slow and deliberate. On its doors, the King Energy logo glinted in the sun. 2 men stepped out. Not brutes, not police, but professionals. Black suits, white shirts. The kind of presence that didn't need volume to command a room. One of them held a manila envelope. The other, an electronic tablet already lit up and ready to sign. I stepped back from the railing. It had begun. I made it to the front hallway just as the doorbell rang. Before the butler could move, Loretta swept past me in a flurry of silk and arrogance. She opened the door with a smile already painted on. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she said, not bothering to hide her tone of superiority. The taller of the 2 men held up his badge. "Ma'am, we're with King Energy's Corporate Asset Recovery Division. This is in regard to the Lexus GX460, plate ending in 927. Her smile froze. "I'm sorry, what?" The man handed her the envelope. The vehicle was reclassified last week as a business asset. Due to pending audits and internal investigations, it's being recalled for reassessment. Loretta blinked, lips parting. "That car was a gift from my son. He paid for it. Cash." "With company funds," the second man replied. "Evenly. Unlawfully reallocated." She looked at the document in her hands like it was written in a foreign language. Her fingers trembled as she flipped the pages. The color drained from her face as she saw Damon's name, the authorization dates, the internal memos. "No, this must be—" She laughed, sharp and breathy. "There must be a mistake. My husband, Walter, he wouldn't—" "I'm afraid this has been approved by the chairman himself," the taller man said. "Effective immediately." Loretta's jaw slackened. Her eyes flicked to me. I didn't say a word. The recovery team moved with clinical efficiency. No raised voices, no dramatics. One man opened the car. The other took photographs, noted mileage, documented the contents. A silk scarf, an umbrella, a bottle of high-end perfume. All of it bagged, tagged, and labeled. When Loretta tried to stop them, placing herself between the car and the agent, he simply stepped around her. Not forcefully, just uninterested. Her power didn't exist here. "This is absurd," she shouted. "You can't just take my car." But they could, and they did. And when the ignition didn't respond, when the engine refused to hum, her illusion cracked. She reached inside, fumbling as if grabbing something, anything, would make it hers again. It didn't. The agent held out a clipboard. "Please confirm receipt of contents removed." Loretta stared at it like it was a weapon. Then, without a word, she turned and walked back toward the house, her silk robe billowing behind her like a cape in retreat. She didn't make it to the door. Halfway across the patio, her steps slowed. I saw it before anyone else did. The glass in her hand, forgotten, tilted just slightly. It slipped, shattered on the flagstone. She froze, not because of the glass, but because she realized. Everyone had seen, the butler, the housekeeper, even the gardener who pretended to rake leaves but hadn't moved in 10 minutes. There were no flashing cameras, no tabloids, no gossip blogs, just real people, in real time, watching her collapse without touching the ground. She stood there for a long moment, shoulders trembling, hands stiff at her sides. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Please, just go." The agents were already done. They left without another word. And Loretta stood there, bathed in sunlight, surrounded by silence, looking like a ghost wearing pearls. Inside, the house felt colder. Damon hadn't returned yet, and Loretta disappeared into her room for the rest of the day. She didn't eat lunch, didn't post to her story, didn't call anyone. I sat by the piano, fingers grazing the keys, not playing, just resting. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, but I didn't. I felt still, not cold, not cruel, just clear. Because I understood something that day. There's no need to scream when the truth is louder than fiction. That night, my father and I passed each other on the stairs. He didn't say anything. He just gave me a nod, small, sure, and final. I nodded back. We didn't need to speak. The message had been delivered, and it hit harder than any courtroom ever could. As I closed my bedroom door that night, the silence felt different, not empty, full, weighted with meaning. For the first time, I realized power doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it wears your last name and knocks softly before reclaiming what's been lost. And sometimes it simply watches from the top of the stairs and nods. People think explosions are loud, but sometimes the loudest things are the ones that don't make a sound. Like the second before a glass hits the floor, or the silence that follows your name spoken with just enough venom to burn. That night, the house was full again. The dining room glowed with soft golden lights and the hum of designer laughter. 20 guests, board members, in-laws, polished acquaintances, all gathered for an evening carefully curated by Damon. 3 courses, imported wines, floral centerpieces, and live violinists in the conservatory. It was supposed to be perfect. Damon was in his element. He smiled too widely, laughed too loudly, slapping shoulders like a senator who'd already won re-election. Legacy, he said between bites. That's what we're really building, isn't it? And they all nodded, because nodding was easier than questioning. Walter, ever silent, sat at the head of the table like a king whose crown had already been passed, even if the court didn't know it yet. I sat beside Damon, not at the foot of the table, but not quite seen either. I wore my quiet like armor. And then the phone rang. It was Damon's. He looked down, smirked. "Mom," he announced to the room. Probably locked herself out of the TV again. He tapped to answer and pressed speaker, and then it erupted. Damon, they're here. They took my things. They took my jewelry. Who are these men?" Loretta's voice wasn't the cool, curated hum we knew. It was chaos, screeching, raw. Guests froze mid-bite. Forks hovered in midair. Even the violinist in the other room faltered, trailing off into an eerie, unplanned silence. "They said you signed off on it. My laptop, my bags, my art." Someone coughed. A woman's hand reached for a wine glass and missed. "You promised this would never touch me, Damon." And then, click. Damon hung up. He stared at the phone, lips slightly parted, as if expecting it to explain itself. Then he looked up and found me. "You," he whispered. I didn't move. "You planned this," he said louder now, standing. "You planned all of this." Every eye in the room turned toward me, but I kept mine on him. "You think humiliating my mother is how you win?" he barked. "You think this is strength? Watching her cry, destroying your own family?" My heart beat like a war drum, but my face didn't flinch. He leaned forward, trembling. "I let you into this world, Sierra. You were nothing before me." It wasn't just a lie. It was a confession. I stood up, not fast, not dramatic, just deliberate. The hush in the room deepened. Damon waited for me to say something, to cry, to protest, to beg. Something, but I didn't. I just looked at him. Not with rage, not even pity, but clarity, and that scared him more than screaming ever could. He slammed his fist on the table. Glasses jumped. A plate cracked. My father slowly set his napkin down. "You don't speak to her like that," Walter said, voice sharp as steel. Damon turned toward him. "You're going to defend her, after everything I've done for this family." Walter rose, calm, final. "You're not family anymore," gasps around the table. A fork clattered to the floor. "What are you talking about?" Damon demanded. "You're out," Walter said, "of the company, effective this morning." He pulled a folded document from his coat and placed it in front of Damon. "Violation of ethical standards, exploitation of corporate resources, misuse of authority. You can't do this." "I already did." Walter took a $20 bill from his pocket, tucked it gently into Damon's jacket. "That's for your Uber. You said it was more practical." Guests remained frozen, as if any movement might trigger the collapse of the room. The guards didn't touch him. They didn't have to. The silence escorted him out more brutally than force ever could. Damon looked around, wild-eyed, waiting for someone to stop this. No one did. He turned back to me, desperation cracking through the bravado. Sierra? He choked. But I said nothing. I didn't look away. He left. And when the door clicked shut behind him, the room exhaled. Soft murmurs. Shifting chairs. Someone poured more wine, their hands trembling slightly. The illusion had shattered, and everyone knew it. I sat back down, picked up my fork, and for the first time in years, I ate without feeling like I had to swallow pieces of myself with each bite. That night upstairs, the bedroom was silent, empty in a way that felt clean. I opened the drawer, took out the ring box, and held it in my palm. It didn't sparkle anymore. Maybe it never really had. I sat on the edge of the bed where I had once cried myself to sleep more times than I could count. The silence around me didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I slipped the ring off, not as a threat, not as a message, but as a release. I placed it inside the velvet box, closed it, and exhaled. I stood, walked to the mirror, looked at myself, truly looked. Not the wife, not the disappointment, not the scapegoat. Just a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. The weight was gone, and what replaced it was something I hadn't felt in years: peace. As I stood there in that quiet room, I realized that night wasn't about losing a husband. It was about finding myself. And this silence? It finally belonged to me. Some women burn bridges, others build something better from the ashes. And I intended to do just that. Closure doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence. And this morning, the silence in the Hudson estate was louder than any scream I'd ever held back. The staff moved slower than usual, as if they sensed something sacred had been broken, and not just porcelain or peace. The coffee was brewed, the curtains drawn, but everything felt off, airless, like we were living inside a paused memory. Loretta had left first. Early, no confrontation, no tears. Just the soft rumble of a Rolls-Royce engine before sunrise, and the absence of perfume lingering in the foyer. All that remained of her was a forgotten scarf and a dining chair still slightly pulled out. Walter had already sealed the last email before I even finished my morning tea. "He's out," he said, tapping his tablet. "Every system, every account. HR processed the final strike just now." "Good," I said, barely above a whisper. He handed me a plain envelope. Slim. Inside, a single check. $20, no memo line, no note. Just a signature and an unspoken message that said, "This is all you're worth now." I blinked. Not in shock, but in relief. Walter met my eyes and said, "He always bragged Uber was more efficient. Let's test that theory." Damon arrived later than expected, right before sunset, that magic hour where gold light coats everything, even regrets. I watched him walk up the path from the upstairs window. His steps were slower, heavier, the shoulders that used to square off in every room now hunched forward, sagging beneath the weight of consequence. He wasn't dressed in designer. No Rolex. No smug grin. Just a man in a wrinkled button-down, carrying a backpack and what was left of his ego. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. He stepped inside anyway. Like a ghost retracing footsteps it no longer owned. We sat in the sunroom. This room used to be mine. The eucalyptus leaves outside would sway and scatter sunlight across the floor like blessings. Now they cast shadows. Everything felt unfamiliar, even though nothing had changed. Or maybe that was the change. Damon shifted in the chair, avoided my eyes. "I didn't know they'd go this far," he said. "You mean my father?" I asked. "Or karma?" He sighed. "Both." I didn't respond. Let the weight of truth sit between us. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sierra. You have to believe that." "No, I don't," I replied softly. "But I do believe you never thought you'd get caught." That stung more than anything else I could have said. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. I thought I was protecting us, shielding you from business stress." I tilted my head. "You weren't shielding me. You were silencing me." He winced. "Good." From my coat, I pulled the envelope, placed it on the table between us like an offer or a verdict. He opened it, stared. $20, he said, half laughing. "That's for your Uber," I said, "and a very small down payment on what you owe every woman who ever mistook control for love." He didn't smile, didn't blink. just stared at the check like it was a mirror showing him everything he didn't want to see. "I guess this is really happening," he whispered. "No," I said. "This already happened. This is just the part where you leave." He stood, but slow, like it hurt. Not just his pride, his body, his soul. Like all the lies finally had weight. At the door he hesitated. Not for forgiveness, for comfort, which was worse. "I gave you my best," he said. "No, Damon. You gave me your version of love, and it came with terms, conditions, and expiration dates." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I won't fight the divorce," he said. "I'll leave clean." I nodded. "That's the first real gift you've ever given me." After he left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt safe. And God, I didn't realize how long I'd gone without that. Upstairs, I opened my jewelry drawer. The ring box was still there. That expensive little lie we bought together. I opened it. The diamond still shone. It always did. Even lies sparkle under the right light. But I didn't throw it. I didn't burn it. I just closed the box and placed it in the drawer marked past. Walter knocked once before stepping into my room. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm not broken," I replied. "Just breathing for the first time." He smiled, sat beside me on the edge of the bed. "You were always stronger than you thought," he said. "I had to be," I whispered. No one was coming to save me. He reached over, took my hand. "I didn't save you, Sierra," he said. "I just stepped out of your way." And that, oddly enough, was the most fatherly thing he'd ever said. We ate dinner in the kitchen that night. No servers, no plates made for Instagram, just soup, bread, and 2 glasses of red. It tasted like survival, like something ancient and quiet and good. After dinner, I walked through the halls. Damon's things were gone. His scent faded. His presence erased like chalk from a board. But I didn't feel abandoned. I felt reclaimed. In the guest room, I found his cufflinks. I placed them in a drawer. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. Even polished metal can hide rust inside. Later that night, I stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was clear, and I could finally see the stars again. I stood barefoot, arms crossed, hair loose in the breeze, not because I was waiting for anyone, but because the stillness finally felt earned. In the silence, I heard a voice. Mine, not whispering, not breaking, but humming. Soft and steady. You don't always hear the sound of a downfall. Sometimes it's quiet, unremarkable, like a credit card being declined, a phone call that goes to voicemail, an Uber never arriving. For Damon and Loretta, the descent was neither dramatic nor cinematic. It was worse. It was slow. It began with the bank alerts. One by one, accounts were flagged. Lines of credit frozen, access revoked. The Hudson Estates accountants were thorough and merciless, because Walter had trained them to be. They moved faster than whispers and cleaner than vengeance. I didn't celebrate. I observed. Like a surgeon watching a tumor detach from the body, Loretta's suite at the Langford was short-lived. The moment her card bounced, the concierge, who had once bent at the waist to greet her, barely made eye contact while escorting her out. She left with 2 trunks, a chipped manicure, and a face twisted by disbelief. No one offered to help. She'd spent decades building social capital in the form of arrogance. Turns out it doesn't convert to loyalty when the bottom falls out. She called Damon 17 times that day. He picked up on the 18th and screamed at her. I wasn't there, but I imagine the echo didn't bounce back. They moved into a 1-bedroom sublease in an aging complex on the outskirts of town. The hallway smelled like mildew and missed rent. The neighbors didn't recognize them, and that was the real insult. Damon, who once claimed status is everything, now stood in line for shared laundry machines and expired vending snacks. The living room doubled as his bedroom. Loretta took the only actual bed. She claimed she needed it for her spine. Damon didn't argue. He didn't have the energy. He applied for consulting gigs. No replies. He called friends in the energy sector. No return calls. He emailed investors who once begged for his time. Not a single response. The silence was educational. Turns out, when you strip a man of borrowed power, his voice doesn't carry far. By week 3, he was flipping burgers at a roadside grill, part-time, no benefits, The uniform was polyester, the schedule unforgiving, but it was honest work, and it terrified him. Not because it was beneath him, though his ego certainly thought so, but because it demanded humility. And Damon had never practiced that muscle. It ached every time he clocked in. Loretta didn't handle poverty well. She paced the apartment barefoot, cursing the betrayal, convinced Walter had orchestrated everything just to humiliate her. She wasn't wrong, but she also wasn't innocent. She started hoarding receipts, writing letters to lawyers who never answered. At night, she'd cry in the bathroom with the door cracked just wide enough so Damon could hear. She wanted pity, but all she got was shared resentment. They began to argue over lights left on, dishes in the sink, who used too much hot water, small things. But in a small place, small things grow teeth. One night, the neighbors called the building manager, screaming, plates breaking, a lamp thrown at a wall. No injuries, just noise and embarrassment. The manager left a warning notice on their door the next morning. Damon peeled it off and stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, he took the trash out. It was the first responsible thing he'd done in weeks. He called me once, blocked number. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail, short, shaky. I know I can't fix it. I just wanted to say I see it now, all of it. You were the only real thing I ever had. I didn't deserve you, and maybe that's why I lost you. I listened once, then deleted it. Forgiveness doesn't always come with reunion. Sometimes it just comes with peace. Meanwhile, Walter never mentioned Damon again. He returned to work, more focused than ever. We shared coffee in the mornings, talked about supply chains, sustainability, and eventually, healing. He never gloated. But I could see it in his posture. His daughter had found herself again. And that was all the revenge he needed. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on the patio and think of Damon, not with longing, with clarity. He was never the monster. He was just a man who thought charm was currency, and manipulation was management. He didn't fall from grace. He tripped over his own reflection. And no one was there to catch him, because he'd pushed them all away long before he slipped. The hardest part of losing everything isn't sleeping on a couch. It's realizing that no one misses you, that you're not just broke. You're irrelevant. One morning, Damon stepped out of the apartment complex and noticed something. The mailboxes. His name wasn't even on one. The landlord had never bothered, and neither had he, because some part of him still thought he was passing through. But this was home now. Home wasn't marble floors or imported stone counters. Home was cheap blinds, low ceilings, and the faint echo of his mother calling his name, just to ask if he'd seen her pills again. I never visited, not out of cruelty, but because I had no more to give. I'd spent years pouring into him, holding space, lowering my voice, shrinking my needs, and now I was full. With silence, with calm, with my own name, finally spoken without apology. Let the world forget his titles. Let his name fade from headlines. Let the silence teach him what the noise never could. Some trials don't end with applause. They end with a chair scraping the floor, a woman collapsing, and a man realizing he spent his entire life betting on the wrong self. Damon filed for divorce with the same ego he brought into our marriage. He wanted his name back, half the assets, and most laughably, sympathy. What he got instead was an invitation to court and an appointment with reality. It was a Wednesday, cloudy, a windless kind of cold that felt judgmental. I remember arriving early. I stood outside the courthouse for 10 full minutes, watching couples walk in with files, folders, and fatigue. No one ever walks into a divorce hearing with hope. They walk in looking for mercy, and in Damon's case, perhaps a loophole. He sat 2 rows ahead, suit wrinkled at the elbows, a spot of something on his collar. Loretta sat beside him, tightly coiled, dressed like the verdict would be televised. If grief had a designer label, she wore it. I noticed her gloves, cream leather, hands shaking underneath. She didn't look at me. Damon didn't either. But I saw the side of his jaw tighten when I entered. Good. That meant he still remembered what dignity looked like. The courtroom was modest. Fluorescent lights, dull carpet, everything a little too beige for drama. Yet tension filled the room like steam under pressure. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with deep lines around her eyes, entered without fanfare. She greeted no one. She didn't need to. Power doesn't introduce itself. Damon's attorney opened with flair, as if we were debating a merger. Mr. Hudson, he claimed, was a key emotional and strategic partner in this union. His contributions, though less visible, were foundational. Foundational? I almost laughed. As if lying, manipulating, and draining were cornerstones of a home. Deborah, my lawyer, waited patiently, then she stood. Calm, elegant, lethal. Your Honor, we submit Exhibits A through G bank statements, private security footage, communications, and documentation from King Energy Holdings showing misappropriation of company funds. We also submit 3 affidavits from former household staff, testifying to sustained emotional and financial abuse. No PowerPoint, just facts. The kind that didn't need bullet points or transitions. Damon shifted. Loretta stiffened. The judge adjusted her glasses, scanning the evidence without expression. I watched her face closely. She didn't react. She didn't need to. She'd seen worse. But that didn't make this any better. Then came the ruling. Simple, sharp, like a clean cut through old fabric. This court finds that Mr. Damon Hudson has committed gross financial misconduct during the course of this marriage, alongside documented dependency and neglect. Therefore, he is awarded no share of the marital estate and is ordered to repay $300,000 to King Energy Holdings for damages incurred. No spousal support will be granted. She paused, then looked up. This marriage is hereby dissolved. For a second, nothing moved. Then Loretta groaned, not a sob, a guttural, dry sound, like something inside her cracked and slipped loose. She slumped forward, her body folding like laundry, hitting the ground in a rustle of fabric and perfume. People gasped. Damon jumped from his seat, kneeling beside her. Mom, hey, look at me, breathe, okay? But she wasn't unconscious. She was just broken. The paramedics arrived in under 4 minutes. By then, Loretta was sitting upright again, eyes glassy, lipstick smudged. She refused the stretcher, but not the attention. Some performances don't need an audience. They only need a moment. Outside the courtroom, I took the stairs slowly. The sun had finally come out. It felt indifferent. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was empty. But not the kind that aches, the kind that heals, the kind that makes space. Damon caught up to me at the bottom step. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Sierra, I turned. He looked different in daylight, smaller, his suit a little too big. His eyes dull, not from crying, but from understanding. I thought I could win, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Win what? He didn't answer right away. I thought if I got something, anything, it would mean I wasn't a failure. I said nothing. He swallowed. But I am. I know that now. His hands trembled as he spoke, and for a moment I thought he might ask for forgiveness, but he didn't. He just stood there, ashamed, exposed. I let silence stretch between us before replying. You didn't fail because you lost. You failed because you lied for so long you started believing it. He nodded slowly, then looked toward the courthouse, where Loretta was being helped into a black town car by one of the paramedics. She has no one left, he murmured. No, I said. She has you. But you both used each other until there was nothing left to take. There was no grand ending, no hug, no tears. Just Damon, standing under a tree that had started to shed early leaves, watching his mother disappear into the distance, both of them finally seeing the cost of their choices. That night, I made tea in the quiet kitchen. Every cupboard I opened reminded me that I no longer had to explain myself. Every chair felt like mine again. And when I passed the mirror in the hallway, I didn't flinch at the reflection. I smiled at her. The woman who stayed. The woman who survived. The woman who no longer needed revenge, because peace had become its own kind of justice. Sometimes regret doesn't crash through the door. It lingers, it waits, and then, one rainy evening, it looks straight into your eyes from across a candlelit window, older, quieter, and hollowed out by time. We weren't supposed to cross paths again. That's how I had designed my life. Clean cuts, quiet endings, healing in private. I had rehearsed it, the calm, the silence, the peace I finally earned. But regret has a habit of circling back, not as a shout, but a sigh, soft, persistent, impossible to ignore. It was a Tuesday night. Nothing tragic, nothing special. Rain tapped the sidewalk like shy footsteps. My father had invited me to dinner at La Velina's, an Italian place we used to visit when I was still married. Dim lighting, old jazz records, wooden booths that smelled faintly of pine and wine. The kind of place where every chair had a memory, and the waiters remembered your father's favorite after-dinner drink. He wore his gray coat that night, the one Mother had picked out years ago. I wore a simple black dress, clean lines, no drama. I was ready to enjoy a quiet meal, maybe even a dessert, and leave the past untouched. But fate has its own sense of theater. As we stepped under the awning, I caught a glimpse of the valet stand. It was just a silhouette at first, a man in a damp navy jacket, hood pushed back, shoulders stiff against the chill. Nothing unusual, until I heard his voice. "May I take your keys, sir?" And just like that, the world tilted. I didn't turn immediately. I froze. Part instinct, part disbelief. The voice was unmistakable. Even soaked in rain and humility, it carried the old rhythm, the half-confidence that once commanded rooms, now dulled by exhaustion. I looked, and there he was, Damon. He looked older, not just in years, but in weight, the kind that settles in your spine when too many doors have closed on you. His cheeks were slightly sunken, jaw unshaven, eyes surrounded by sleepless shadows. His once pristine hands now calloused, gripping the valet ticket with a practiced submission. But what struck me most wasn't how different he looked. It was how suddenly small he seemed. He hadn't seen me yet. He stood in front of my father, his gaze down, soaked to the bone. My father, God bless his grace, said nothing. He glanced at me, a brief flash of recognition in his eyes, then handed over the keys without ceremony. As Damon turned toward the car, something made him glance over his shoulder. That's when he saw me. His steps slowed, our eyes locked. And in that instant, every year, every silence, every scar, we both felt them rise. I didn't speak, neither did he. But his face cracked, just slightly. The pride that once lived behind his eyes evaporated. He looked like someone remembering the lyrics to a song he wrote and forgot. Something once beautiful, now impossible to sing. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with quiet laughter and soft silverware. Jazz floated through the air, mingling with garlic and wine. My father took his seat without a word, but I stood at the window, watching. Waiting for what? I didn't know. Damon placed the car gently in the lot, then stepped back under the awning. He didn't go inside. He didn't run. He just stood there, staring. At me, through glass, through years, through everything. The rain picked up. Drops danced down the window pane like fingertips dragging across memory. He looked at me like a man searching for something lost in a fire. Not the object itself, but proof that it ever existed. I don't know how long we stood like that, two strangers bound by silence. But then I moved. I lifted my hand and gestured to the waiter. He approached politely. "Would you like the curtain drawn, ma'am?" I nodded. "Yes, please." The velvet curtain slid across the window with a soft hush, a gentle final goodbye. No slamming doors, no final words, just fabric and distance and rain. I sat down slowly. My father poured me water, then reached for his wine without comment. We didn't need to speak. Some heartbreaks don't ask for attention. They just ask for space. Outside, Damon remained rooted. He didn't shout, didn't plead. He simply stood there, in the downpour, staring at the fabric that now separated him from something he had once taken for granted. And I knew, that behind that glass, he wasn't mourning me. He was mourning who he had been, and everything he would never get to fix. He stepped back, closed his eyes, and whispered something I would never hear. But I didn't need to, because I felt it. In my bones, in my chest, in the part of me that used to ache. He whispered, "I lost her." Not with drama, not with performance, but with the quiet surrender of a man who realized the last bridge had burned while he was still holding the match. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. No tears, no rage, just the hum of memory, I thought of him, the boyish grin, the cruel charm, the endless chances, and how, for all his flaws, part of me had once believed he could be better. And maybe he could have. But some men only learn love by losing it. They say time heals everything. I disagree. Time doesn't heal. It just sharpens the edges of what you already know. And when the truth finally arrives, raw, late, soaked in rain, you don't run toward it. You let the curtain fall, and you move on. Peace doesn't come wrapped in grand apologies or final conversations. It's not loud. It doesn't knock. It arrives like early morning light through half-open blinds. Quiet, uninvited, undeniably real. I never expected to hear from him again. After that night at La Valina's, the rain, the silence, the curtain, I imagined that was it. The final page, the kind of closure that doesn't need punctuation. But time is a funny architect. It builds things you didn't ask for, and sometimes it delivers gifts you didn't know you were waiting for. The package came in early October. My assistant brought it in saying, "It's got no return label, just your name. Looks personal." She wasn't wrong. The handwriting on the front was sharp, familiar in a way that made my stomach stir, like muscle memory awakened by a scent from childhood. Inside, one book, one check, no note. It was Their Eyes Were Watching God, my annotated copy, the one I used to read aloud in the sunroom while Damon pretended not to listen. I had written in the margins, underlined Zora Neale Hurston's words like they were gospel. Halfway through the book, tucked between two dog-eared pages, was a cashier's check. High 5 figures, clean, silent, heavy. I held it in my hands for a long while. Not because of the money, because of what it meant. He remembered. He had kept it. And maybe he had read it again. There was a margin note in his handwriting next to a line I once adored. "Love is like the sea. It's a moving thing." He had scribbled, "I never understood this line, but I think now I do." I didn't call him. I didn't write back. That kind of pain, ours, didn't need rekindling. But I did take the check to my father's lawyer, quietly, discreetly. I set up a trust under an alias, purchased a small single-story home just outside Atlanta. It had a wraparound porch, an accessible bathroom, and a sloped garden filled with rosemary. That home is now where Damon lives. With his mother, he doesn't know it came from me, but I imagine he suspects, because some gestures carry fingerprints even when unsigned. I've been told by the neighbor, my father's friend, that he's different now, that he wakes early, carries his mother out to the porch wrapped in her shawl, that he makes her tea with honey, that he tends to the garden, that he works maintenance at a nearby community rec center. There's no flash left in him, no smugness, just the slow, deliberate movements of a man repairing his soul brick by brick. I never needed Damon to beg, never needed his pain to mirror mine. What I needed, what I fought for, was space. And he finally gave it. It's strange how peace comes, not from apology, but from absence, from letting go. Last Sunday, my father invited me to dinner again at La Valina's. The hostess led us to the same window seat, the one with the velvet curtain, the one where the past once looked me in the eye and shattered. But tonight it felt different. Not haunted, not fragile, just neutral. My father had aged gently, his voice slower, his smiles more deliberate. He poured me wine and asked how my garden was doing. We didn't mention Damon. We didn't need to. But halfway through dessert, he looked at me and said, "You did what I couldn't. You left. You healed." And that almost broke me, not because of the words, but because for the first time in years, I believed them. After dinner, we lingered outside. The sky was clear, no rain this time. I turned back toward the restaurant window. My reflection stared at me, older, calmer, eyes softer. I thought about the girl I had been, the wife, the woman who stayed too long, who tried too hard. I wanted to hug her, tell her, "You made it. You're safe now." Later that night, as I sat by the window in my own home, quiet, candlelit, warm, I opened the book again. Page 214. One final note in his handwriting. "Thank you for leaving." It didn't read like sarcasm. It read like surrender, like acknowledgement. like a man who finally understood that her exit was his only chance at becoming decent. And in my mind, I replied without writing a word, "Thank you for letting me." They say revenge is best served cold. But I disagree. The real power comes not in hurting back, but in healing forward. I didn't get justice in court. I didn't get a public apology. What I got was a life, one where I sleep without flinching, where love is not bartered, where silence is no longer punishment, but peace. He lives in a home now, not lavish, not loud. He takes care of a woman who once looked down on me. He pulls weeds, fixes plumbing. He reads poetry to his mother. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. Not for the girl I used to be, but for the man he is trying to become. Because forgiveness isn't about worthiness. It's about reclaiming the space someone once polluted. It's about saying, you no longer own the pain you caused. Family tragedy isn't the end. It's the fire that burns away what was never love, so that what's real can finally grow. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserve peace. Some revenge doesn't need gunshots, or tears, or someone collapsing in defeat. Some breakups don't leave winners, only those who wake up, and those who stay asleep. Sierra didn't need Damon to suffer the way she once did. She only needed a life where pain no longer whispered at night, where love didn't come with terms and conditions. And Damon, silently, slowly, began to understand. Forgiveness was never a gift for him to receive. It was the door she walked through so she could leave the past behind, without looking back. If you've ever stayed silent when you should have spoken, if you've ever had to choose between kindness and self-respect, drop a single yesy car in the comments, just to say, I made it through too. Or tell me, what does forgiveness mean to you? Is it weakness, or is it the softest kind of strength a person can claim?